Welcome to Podcash, the portable professional development podcast from Cash Alumni. Cash Alumni is the fastest growing association of professionals in care, health and education, and we're happy to have you here. This is where you'll hear from specialists and experts from across our network. Here's what's coming up.
Let's forget calories and let's look at how colourful is the food. I don't mean like Smarties. I mean, how colourful is the food like naturally? We as humans need to eat 30 different vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, proteins, fat a day. The 5 a day is pointless. It's nothing. We basically get hardly anything from eating 5 days a day.
Let's jump in to this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Louise Mercieca. I'm a nutritional therapist and early years nutrition consultant. I spend my time talking about the links that food has on every aspect of our lives.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Food impacts on everything. And I think when we think about food and nutrition, we can kind of switch off a bit because I think it's been mismanaged in the press and it's kind of been exhausted in different avenues, like, for example, dieting or what is considered healthy and the whole notion of good and bad. So I think we've kind of become a bit switched off to the real depth of food and the real impact that food has on it. So what I try to do is just kind of to not talk about good things and bad things and not talk about diets or anything like that, but just talk about the impact that food has on you. And this works with children. I predominantly work with early years because if we can get that right, and we'll probably touch on child health and future outcomes and everything, but if we can get that right, we are proactively addressing a lot of future health problems. And children, the ways to talk to children about food, and this works for grown-ups as well, is to kind of not say, these are unhealthy, these are healthy, these are good, these are bad, this don't eat this. It's to say, well, this is how this food will make you feel. If you eat this is how it will make you feel. It can make you feel grumpy, or it can make you feel happy, or it can make you have lots of energy, or it can make you feel calm when you need to feel calm, or it can help you go to sleep. Food has a direct impact in the here and now. So what we eat for breakfast, for example, will impact on our morning performance, cognitive and physical. So how fired up we are. For grown-ups, this is really important. Children tend to be much better at this, but for grown-ups, if we have the wrong kind of breakfast, we can kind of just have that brain fuzz and kind of just be a bit confused and just like sit at the laptop and just think, and just be a bit confused. So food has that direct impact on us and our ability to do things and our ability to think clearly, but it has a longer term impact. It has an immediate impact, a medium term impact, which can be in the weeks and months around a pattern of food intake. And that can lead to things like frequent infections or just feeling down or not sleeping very well, having no energy, having joint pains. And then the long term comes from anything months, years, decades of food intake and what that can lead to in terms of health associations. And it's also gradual, that we often don't notice the impact because food, we eat it all the time. So it has an impact all the time, but we don't notice the impact it's having until sometimes we're like, God, I just feel dreadful. But you don't think it's to do with the food. And nearly everything is to do with the food.
Playing devil's advocate, obviously you would say that because you think about food a lot because that's what your interest is professionally. But you write some really, really interesting articles for Cash Alumni and for Illuminate magazine. And we've talked about a lot of this stuff in previous episodes of Podcast. So I don't want to go too much over the general, because people can listen to that or they can read the articles for the sort of the basic understanding of what it is that you're talking about. Tell me what's new, what's your updates on the things that you've been looking at that are linked to the stuff that you've done before.
What's new is without sounding really negative, is nothing good, unfortunately. So I think in the last 5 years ago, I wrote my book, did a lot of research about the impact of food and health in the future, which is why I switched my focus to children. What's happened since then? We've obviously had the pandemic. We've now got the cost of living crisis. We've got all manner of different associations with food and health. So we've got this real health inequality. And of course, food isn't the only thing in this jigsaw. Food is a very big part of a jigsaw of life outcomes. It is a very big part, but it's not the only thing. but it does have a real impact, and it is something we can influence. And by that, I don't mean individuals in the condescending way that they're often spoken to of, well, why don't you just go make better choices? Why don't you eat better? Why don't you shop better? Because that is a completely flawed argument that politicians often come out with to battle and say, well, actually, no, they could just choose not to do that. But that's completely impossible. As we've spoken about, and I've definitely written about in terms of cost of living impact on food choices and things like that. But what's happening is we're now starting to see, like I said, food has the sort of here and now, medium and long-term impact. What we're starting to see is some of the longer-term impacts of the change of food landscape in today's health outcomes and today's health predictions. Now, I do focus on children, so there is much of this is to do with children, but there are every report I look at, every meeting I go to, I'm part of a group in Parliament where we look at very miserable reports and health trajectories and projections, and everything is going in the wrong direction. So what's changed is everything that we could have influenced for the better. Everyone knows the impact in terms of health policy, public health, government. So everyone knows the impact of food. Everyone knows the impact of junk food on children's health and development, on adults' health. That is known. So these are not like, oh, all of a sudden this is happening. This was all known and could have been prevented. That we all know what needs to happen to change, but it's not likely to change because the balance of power in terms of the food industry over everything else is swayed in their favour. But what we're starting to see is some of those drip feed of those changes. So children, for example, type 2 diabetes didn't used to be something children got. It's adult onset, was a middle age thing. We just thought that's what adults get. Never considered children would get that 20 years ago. Because of those changes in the food landscape and that drip change of health, we've now got nearly 3,500 children in the UK living with type 2 diabetes. And that figure is rising because while it's not directly linked to obesity, you don't have to be obese to get type 2 diabetes, and you can be overweight and completely healthy. You can be underweight and be at risk for type 2 diabetes. So that's not the main thing, but we've had the biggest spike in childhood obesity linked with the COVID pandemic. So there will be a correlation with those type 2 diabetes figures in the future, in the years to come. And that's just one thing that is directly linked to our food landscape and directly linked to, they call them choices, but they're not lifestyle choices, they're lifestyle factors. And that's just one of the negatives that we're seeing. There are many links with food and emotions and mental health as well. So we're definitely seeing, as a result of the pandemic and the impact on children's mental health, and this is across all ages, terrifyingly, from very young up to teens and people who were teens and are now in their 20s, but are, as a result of the pandemic, suffering. There is a huge link with food, and unfortunately our food landscape is exacerbating stress and anxiety just by the very nature of the foods and drinks that we're consuming without knowing that we're doing it. Just because of the foods that are available to us, they are directly having a negative impact on things like cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and they're deficient in the vitamins and minerals that help to balance our emotions in a natural state. So there are many factors that are directly linked with food that are having real concerning health outcomes in the here and now, but also predicted. So we're predicting that children will not live as long as the generation before them. We're predicting that this generation of children will be physically, mentally and economically worse off than the generation before them. And one of the reports looked at by the Voice for Children showed in the last 10 years a radical slump in life prospects of a newborn baby in the UK today. So not all of that is to do with food, but it is a big part of it.
Well, that was really cheerful.
Sorry, I said it would be miserable.
What can we do about it? What needs to change? And I suppose when a lot of that change is at a pay grade that none of us are ever going to be able to aspire to, what can we do? What are you doing?
What I think the main thing we can do is to be informed, and that's the main thing that I'm trying to do at the moment, is to just, we trust our food landscape. We do. We might have some things that we think, I'm not sure about that. But generally, we go into a shop and we trust that it's there to not make us poorly. But that is just, as a consumer, that's the very least you expect from going to buy food. But unfortunately, that isn't what's happening. The food industry, and I'm not going to get all political and all of that, but the food industry is not designed for our health. It's designed for profit and convenience. And we've kind of led it to be that way as well, in a way, in the last 40 years, because we've wanted things to be quick. We've wanted things to be available. We've wanted things to be cost effective. And we've kind of got used to them being that way. But none of that can come with whole, real, natural foods. We can't get something that's quick and cheap and accessible and we can have it in 3 minutes, you know, from frozen to cooked, if it is whole and real and natural. So that convenient food landscape does come at a price. And that price is not just economic, it's our health. But we do trust, when we go shopping, we do trust that it's not going to make us ill. And I think we have to flip that and question that a bit in ourselves and take some ownership of those food choices. Now, this is a really controversial thing because some people, and I have definitely written about this for you guys, have had those choices taken away from them because of the price of food and the price of foods available. And this is one government legislation that was due to happen and was all passed through Parliament. It was all due to go, and then at the last hurdle just was delayed. And that was the bog-off offers on junk food. So as soon as you walk into many shops, the thing that you're faced with is all of the offers on biscuits, crisps, multi-pack buys of things that are ridiculously cheap. Don't need, but if you look at it and think, I've got 3 or 4 children to feed and that's 24 packets of that versus 6 apples, actually I'm going to get a lot more weeks snacks out of that than the 6 apples. So there is no choice that that person can make that is made for them because it's there and it's all they can afford. The reason why that wasn't implemented was because it was just that the cost of living crisis was blamed, and people, well, they need the cost effective food. Yes, they do, but they need it on healthy food. So we're not going to get a seismic change coming from the powers that be, from those who are in those pay grades, because they're not going to make those changes. They've had plenty of opportunities. The junk food advertising ban for children was another opportunity. It was all passed through Parliament. It was all good to go. And it's been delayed, I think, until January next year, though it keeps moving, because they said the manufacturers needed more time to get ready for that change. You know, make of that what you will. While that's happening, our children, if they're online or if they're walking down certain streets, will be bombarded to 9 junk food adverts in a 30-minute stretch, which is ridiculous. You know, if you think about the bombardment of those adverts and how they're designed to make you feel when you're not in the slightest bit hungry, but then it's all, you know, designed very cleverly by marketing people who know exactly how to market these foods to make you want them. And then suddenly you're hungry and then there it is, you're faced with it. You can order it online. It can be with you in 10 minutes. You can walk past it and it's £1. So there's the entice and there's the solution. So we're not going to see a seismic change. There's been many opportunities for that change and it's not come. So all we can do is to just question that balance of trust and to just think, well, I am going to just question it, because the balance of power will only change when enough people make that change themselves. And that's not easy in the cost of living crisis. We know that fruit and veg consumption is now at the lowest in 50 years, which is really depressing. And because fruit and veg is such a staple for vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and things that just do wonders for our health, and fibre. So one of the things where you look at what's happening now and what might happen in the future as a result of this very low fruit and veg consumption, well, fibre is a key factor in bowel health. And so are we going to see increases in bowel cancers in a few years because we've had such a low intake of fruit and vegetable now? Because, well, fruit and vegetables are 3.5 times more expensive than junk food. So this is the kind of thing where we look at, well, this is happening now, but what will happen in 5-10 years as a result of that? So we do, as individual consumers, we don't hold the power because we can't fix the prices, but we do hold the power in just being able to question and think, well, I know that's an offer and I know that that's cheap. Actually, what could I do instead of that? What is frozen fruit, frozen veg? Is that cheaper? Tinned fruit, not in syrup, please. But what can I do for a similar price that's actually going to support health, which in the long term, because if you think of days off work sick, and I know that might sound silly based on a multi-pack of crisps, but actually any food that can weaken our immune system, can make us feel poorly, will have an immediate, a medium and a long-term effect. So it's not the multi-pack of crisps that's going to make you poorly. It's what's going to happen over a period of time.
This is Podcash, brought to you by Cash Alumni. Did you know you can get even more content for free by following our LinkedIn? Just search Cash Alumni or follow the link in the episode description.
So is this, do you think, understanding more about the difference between buying food that will provide a feeling of being full, but not very much actual food, as in nutrition or the stuff that we actually need to get from food, versus buying food that might leave you hungry, but is actually food and has that nutrition in it?
You make a good point. And actually, the talking of being full, we don't really get full from junk food. And I'm sure I've written about ultra-processed foods for you and the different categories of ultra-processed foods and the group 4 foods, which are designed specifically to not let you get full, really. They're designed so that you don't have to chew them very much. They're a certain texture. I think of like a certain brand of burger and the mushy sort of roll and the consistency when you chew it. That is deliberately designed in a way to make you chew less, to produce less saliva. Because when you produce saliva, it starts the process of telling your body that you're eating, you're processing, you start to feel full, you start to produce a hormone that tells you you're full, leptin. And that's the process of feeling satisfied. These foods don't want you to feel satisfied because you can eat more of them. If you're not satisfied, you can keep going, which is why people will often think, they're rummaging around for something and they'll have eaten a whole packet without realising, and their fingers are rummaging around for more and there's nothing left. But they've not felt that they've eaten it all. They've not felt full or satisfied or that it's finished. They're looking for more, even though they've eaten the whole lot. So we don't feel full from the foods that are marketed as, accessible and economical and all of that sort of thing. So we do need to eat more of them as well, which is another cost issue. So we're eating more of those foods to feel full, but we're never really feeling full or satisfied. So you might find that you're constantly feeling unsatisfied, hungry, wanting to snack, looking for something else, because actually the body's not naturally getting the protein, which is the main thing that tells us we're full, because actually the protein quality is very low in those foods. So actually, to completely flip it over and look at the real foods that would make you feel full, bag of lentils is so cheap. And I know everyone's like, oh, lentils, but you can do so much with lentils. They are dried lentils, really, 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 really cheap, taste of nothing. So you do need to do something with them, but they are so versatile. Curries, soups, stews, anything. Bulk them into half of them instead of using mince. Use half that, half lentils, half mince. You can even use porridge oats in a similar fashion to bulk up a dish to reduce the cost, but to add in things that make you feel full and things that actually give you some nutrition, because you get a lot of protein in lentils, you get a lot of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, you get a lot of things that support your health. So it is about thinking, to answer your question in a very, very long-winded fashion, it is to kind of go back and think, well, actually, this might be labelled as a meal. It might be labelled as something that is, however many calories. And let's remember that calories don't mean anything. Nutritionally, they're just a numeric value. They're not going to, let's not go dieting. We haven't got time for that today. Otherwise, I'll be here for a week ranting about how bad that is for everybody. But let's not think about calories, but let's just think about actual what's in it for me. If I eat this, what is it doing for me? Is it doing good things for me? Is it doing bad things for me? And just question that for each, and it will take a little bit longer until you get used to it. But as soon as you start to flip a product over and look at ingredients, and I think I've probably mentioned this before in terms of looking at the group 4 ingredients, they are only available. You cannot get them in a domestic kitchen or a domestic coffee shop or a restaurant. You can only get them if they've been engineered in a lab. As soon as you recognise those ingredients and think, well, that doesn't sound like food, it's much easier to think, well, I'm not going to buy that because that doesn't sound like food. And then you're starting to make a gradual change into more real foods. And that is possible on a budget. It's just planning and time and prep, which I know people don't have. But we sometimes have to think, well, I have to take a bit more ownership because nothing is going to change. And if nothing changes, I'm likely to walk into ill health because of this food landscape.
Going back to children or to people who are working with other groups of people that they care for or care about, and thinking about the sort of education that goes with that, how do you explore that with that group of people that maybe the messaging around calories is a bit pointless if you're getting, say, 2,000 calories of nothing useful versus 3,000 calories of stuff that your body actually needs and can use. Or sort of that, how to pick the right things to make you satisfied and full.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a mindset shift of things we've been taught before. The pace of change now with the ultra-processed food landscape is frankly terrifying. And our 2 to 5 year olds in the UK consume more ultra-processed foods than any other children on the planet. So we are leading the way, not in a good way, of the consumption of that. So the first thing I think in terms of education is it food or is it not food? And that can eliminate a lot of the ultra-processed foods. And then it's also just a case of, just going back to basics with food. Just really forget about how many calories of it. I know this is helpful now that restaurants are required to put calories on the menus, which I've spoken at length about on various radio shows and things. But that's a side issue. But let's forget calories and let's look at how colourful is the food. I don't mean like Smarties. I mean, how colourful is the food, like naturally? We as humans need to eat 30 different vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, proteins, fats a day. That's not the 5 a day. That's much more than that. The 5 a day is pointless. It's nothing. We basically get hardly anything from eating 5 of those a day. But if you consider herbs, spices, so garlic, if you're cooking a dish, garlic, onion, any number of spices. If you're doing a curry, you can get 5 spices in straight away. Then you're up to like 8 of those already. So it's doable to get to 30 every day. But it's about, well, how colourful is the food? How natural is the food? What's actually in it? What's the protein? Protein is the most important thing for making us feel full and satisfied. And protein contains amino acids, which are basically the building blocks of life. So our body needs proper protein. I'm not talking about a burger. Some burgers are fine, but, you have to go out of your way to get a good one, or, a nugget. I'm talking about proper protein. And meat protein and fish protein, or any animal-derived protein, so that includes dairy and cheese and things like that, are a complete protein source. They contain all of the amino acids that we need. Children need more amino acids than us grown-ups. But any animal-derived protein source is complete. So if you're a meat eater or you're a vegetarian who eats cheese or a pescatarian, then you're kind of okay for your range of proteins you can go to. If you're vegan, you have to have much more planning and preparation. Do not rely on the pre-packed vegan convenience foods because they're ultra-processed. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Just because they're vegan and in a green box doesn't mean they're healthy. It can often mean the opposite. The meat product might actually be healthier than it's not necessarily a healthy alternative. But it really is. Humans have survived for many, many, many years living without ultra-processed foods and without the convenient Western diet. As soon as any country on earth introduces a Western diet, they become poorly within 1 or 2 years. We start to see health changes, population changes within 1 to 2 years of a Western diet being introduced to any population on the planet, which shows you the power of food and what it does. But when you can see that on a blank canvas, i.e. a country that's never had these foods before, it's quite easy to see. When you're in a country like ours, where they've been gradually coming into our food landscape, just a few more every year, and then quite a rapid change in the past few years, we haven't noticed that we've been getting more poorly, that we've been feeling more blah, because it's just normal for us to feel a bit blah and not notice that we're feeling a bit rubbish. And so for us, it's a bit more frightening, I think, because we're not noticing how bad we're feeling and we're not recognizing how bad the situation is. And I don't mean to sound really like doom and gloom, but I do think there is not going to be a change. So I think people do need to be aware that we shouldn't just blindly trust our food. We should question. And it is possible. It really is possible on a budget, but it really does take a bit more planning and time than, getting something and putting it in the oven.
So for people who do have that time to do that planning, that sounds great. And it would be amazing if every family in the UK could could do that, and not only, I suppose, make that time to do it for themselves, but also to bring their children along and to teach them that food stuff. But obviously that's not possible at this very moment in time. And there'll be lots of people listening who maybe have just finished a 16-hour shift and are on their way home on an hour and a half bus journey to do all of the things. So what can those people in the audience who work with children or who work with groups of people that they care for do within those educational settings to, I suppose, start that change?
I think, yeah, that's a really good point. And I think another thing in many sectors where people are doing a lot of shift work is the options to them whilst they're on their shift are shocking. And so you're fueling a day's work with the wrong fuel. So by the time you do eventually finish, you're just exhausted. And I do completely get that. And then whatever journey you've got home, and then you're getting home to whatever you've got to get at home, you know, washing, kids, homework, getting ready for the next day, etc. I do know that kind of is a very real issue. And we're not helping. Not me personally, I'd love to help, but the sectors like the NHS, the food available to doctors and nurses is just terrible on shift. You know, same with the police. I've done some work with the police, and they are just running on just really empty calories and not supporting anything, any aspect of their physical or mental health. So it is
good number of police cars in the drive-through queue, don't you?
Yeah, but there's no other. They are literally just going from here and there and rushing around. They haven't got time to go and sit down and have something properly. But it's just, we're not helping those workers to fuel their performance properly at all. And so they will have health issues, especially shift workers, because we know there's the correlation with shift work and heart disease, et cetera. But to come back to a more immediate kind of what can we do and how can we help, I think a really good tool for anyone who does do shifts is a slow cooker, because they are really cheap, and you can even do it if you're overnight for the morning, as long as it's safe. Check your plugs if you leave anything plugged in overnight. Don't want any, hazards on my count. But anything that is can be left. You can do porridge in a slow cooker, so you can literally wake up, take the lid off it, spoon it out. You've got porridge in the morning. It is so cheap. Porridge. You don't need fancy oats, just basic oats, some normal milk or some oat milk or some plant-based milk or whatever milk of your choice. You can sprinkle a bit of cinnamon in, and then in the morning you could sprinkle a bit of honey in and maybe add a sliced banana. Really, really cheap. But there is a sustainable breakfast that has got a slow release of energy. It's got protein. It's going to support you. It's got nutrients in there, and you haven't had to do anything in the morning other than take the lid off and spoon it out. Similarly with a slow cooker, I do love a slow cooker. You can bung a load of stuff in the morning if you have to. Empty it out, give it a quick swirl, chuck some lentils in, some vegetables, some stock, and then just pop it on again. And then you've got like a casserole when you get home. And yes, that's a bit more of a faff and a bit more of having to do something, but it's not that much, really. And you chop up some carrots, bun them in. You don't need to peel them, just rinse them. That there are things that we can do quickly, so that when you do come home, you are exhausted. The last thing you need is the food you're going to have, because you're exhausted mentally and physically. So therefore, you're just going to have something to fix you, to have that. I'm just so hungry. And it could be an advert. It could be you got something in the freezer. It could be you saw something on your way home. Joe passed a chip shop or something. Chips are very expensive, actually. But, so when you're hungry, you kind of just think, I'll have that. That is not what your body needs. Your body's crying out to be looked after because you've worked so hard mentally and physically. And what your body needs is something that's going to help to restore it, so that when you go to sleep, your body's able to restore itself when it sleeps. The type of food we eat before we go to sleep does impact on our quality of sleep, and our quality of sleep then impacts on every other aspect of our health going forward. So if we could have a slow cooked meal, come home from work, take the lid off, spoon it out, we've got something that's instantly ready, but it is actually going to support our health. You can put meat in a slow cooker as well, because it cooks slowly, it's not going to dry out, etc., etc. Spooning it out, having some nourishment, you're coming home to it, you open the door, you can smell it, and you just spoon it out and it's ready. And whilst it might not be what you fancy when you're driving past the 9 junk food adverts you're likely to see on your 30-minute drive home, you will eventually start to, when we wean ourselves off, and it is a case of weaning ourselves off, because these foods are addictive. They do activate parts of the brain. I've definitely written about this for you guys before. They do activate parts of the brain linked to pleasure, reward, and addiction. So we are literally having to wean ourselves off these foods. But when we do that, the results are amazing, because actually we can then see these adverts and they don't do anything for us. We are in control, not the adverts. For the majority of people, the food is in control, not them. So when they see the advert, it has the effect the advertisers want. It drives up the hedonic hunger, which is the not biological hunger. It's the, oh, that looks good, I really fancy that, or I can smell that, I can taste it. I remember when I had that, it was great. That's hedonic hunger, and that's what the advertisers are relying on you having to buy their products. And what we don't want is for them to win. I see everything as a battle. So I battle against the food industry, I battle against government, I battle against this, because it is a battle. And we each have our own individual battle, because if we don't battle, they are winning, because we're buying their food, we're fueling ill health. And it's not our fault, we're busy. Food is expensive. We know all of that. But if we let them win, nothing's going to change.
This is Podcash, brought to you by Cash Alumni. For discounts on everything from Apple products to MOTs, visit the cashback page of cashalumni.org.uk. That's cashalumni.org.uk.
The messaging of self-care has been hijacked by people who want to sell other things, because actually self-care isn't about having a bar of chocolate or getting yourself a takeaway because you deserve it. It's about making the right choices to help you feel better tomorrow. Sometimes they're the hard choices. But how do we explain that to children?
I think with children, and I do talk to children as if they're like little grown-ups, because actually I think we often think, oh, we can't talk to children about that. They don't understand children are amazing. They are super intelligent. Remember, their brain is firing up more synapses and connections, twice as many as ours. So, they are more cognitively capable than many grown-ups when you talk to them, because their brain is still operating at such a rapid pace of knots and pace of development that whatever we say to them, they are able to absorb it. And remember that they are just completely sponges at that time of what we say to them, they are absorbing. And I think with children, the way I talk about children and food in nurseries is to kind of look at visuals. So a visual of a happy face, a sad face, and linking that with different types of foods. So if we feel, and I do like work with early years practitioners as well, and so I say, please don't say things like, if we're sad, let's have some cake to cheer us up, because actually that's creating all manner of connections with food that link to emotional eating. But, we are moving away from that, I feel, as a profession, and we're not doing that as much. I think it's ingrained in us to do that, but we're trying to move away from that, because we are all feeders. I'm definitely a feeder. We get pleasure from feeding, but we need to think of the pleasure of feeding with the foods that nourish, and not the pleasure of feeding with the foods that we think will make the child happy, because the child isn't necessarily aware that cake might make them happy until we introduce that notion to them. And we can introduce the notion of a banana will make you happy, because a banana will boost your serotonin. Serotonin is an amazing chemical in the body that makes you feel really calm and happy. Children are able, they might not remember what serotonin is, but they will remember the banana, and they'll remember that, and you can give them a smiley face sticker or something. So we can make those links with food, and we can, with older children, slightly older than nursery, going into education. What I'm trying to do with primary education is to just say, right, you're the generation, all of these, and I'm not quite as doom and gloom with them, but you're the generation that all of these health predictions are relating to. You're the generation that's, predicted to have all these health problems, and you deserve to be aware of the food landscape, and you deserve to be aware that you are directly being targeted, because they're not meant to be, but children are directly being targeted with character advertising, with clever advertising, with advertising in children's games popping up, with TV adverts. They're being directly marketed with junk food that will have an adverse effect on their health in the here and now and on their future. So they deserve to know that, because they might not know that. They might not make that connection. Their parents might not know that. Their parents might not know what they're seeing, because these things pop up, in where they shouldn't. So don't get me started on the online safety bill. But, there are many things that children are exposed to that they deserve to understand. And I think children can have the capacity to understand. It's not about preaching them. It's not about saying, you must never eat burgers, you must never drink these energy drinks. It's about saying, these advertisers are promoting these to you. Do you know what they contain? Do you know what that might do? Do you know what that might make you feel? And if you have this drink in the afternoon, how might you feel an hour or so after it? If, you know, and just to explain to them the effect on their body, to explain to them the biology. Children are quite interested in their biology because the body's fascinating and the body does so many amazing things that actually to get them engaged in that, and food is a direct biological link on the body. So you can make so many references to it with them and just explain about the blood sugar roller coaster, how that will make them feel if you're sitting at school and you're really confused and you're getting really annoyed because you can't understand something. Well, it could be because what you had for breakfast. It could be because of what you had on your way to school. If they're older and they're walking to school and they're passing a newsagent and I see it, I live near a school and they're having a can of something on their way in or a chocolate bar on their way in. They've probably had a nice breakfast at home, but they're topping it up. Well, that's going to make you feel like this. And then you're going to feel disengaged because you're confused. You're going to feel like you're angry because nothing's making sense. Well, food does that to you. Food has that direct link on your emotions and your cognitive ability. So we don't make those references in everyday conversations about food. So that's my aim in terms of starting those conversations so that actually children, they're not in control of their shopping, they're not in control of their choices, but they can start to make the connections and understand. And then it starts conversations at home.
That's brilliant. Obviously, I keep an eye on different things that you're doing through being connected through LinkedIn and through just generally seeing what you're doing when you're communicating like through the health kick and things like that. How does the work that you're doing with allotment projects and with growing food link to all of these issues and the stuff that you're trying to solve through the nutritional therapy stuff that you do?
Yeah, that's an interesting one to bring. So I love these kind of projects because these are the ones I'm doing with my community interest companies. It's just about re-engaging with food. That's the main thing. So that it covers EYFS and it covers primary Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculums. So they cover things like food waste and environmental impact of food. They cover nutrition, but it's just bringing it to them at a level where they can get hands-on with it. So they're literally digging up beetroot in the farm and they're learning from, it's a community farm, so they're learning from the volunteers about the seasonality of produce, what grows when, going to the farm at different points in the year so they can see it through the seasons, they can see the different wildlife, what the pond is like at different times of the year is really interesting to them. And they have chickens, which you'll like, so they can see, they can see the chickens and how the chicken relationship changes as well, because that's quite interesting in terms of the dynamics of the chicken coop. That's quite an interesting one. But the idea behind all of that is just to get, some children will think food grows, in a supermarket or comes in a bag. They won't know the real food farm fork kind of link. So it's about getting children actively involved because they're much more likely to try food if they've been involved in it in some way. So we had children picking vegetables that they had never seen before, kale, beautiful kale growing on the farm that they were picking, and they took it back to the classroom and they ate it. And so many people were saying they would never eat that at home. They would never have eaten it. And even the teachers were saying, we were really surprised. They made a big thing of soup from everything possible went in it. God knows what it was. It was just like a witch's brew of all the different vegetables and some herbs because they had wild herbs growing. It all went in. And even the teachers were saying they were surprised by how many children actually ate it and asked for seconds. And it just goes to show that children are not predisposed to not like vegetables and to not like healthy things. We just make this assumption that children like junk food. Every menu that has a children's menu does it, and it drives me mad. Why do our children only deserve nuggets and chips when the adult menu has got all these nice things on? Why do we do that to children? Why do we play down their health to only give them these options and therefore limit their palate? So children are more than capable when they can understand that food relationship, getting dirty on the farm, getting their hands dirty, picking stuff, walking around, just seeing tomatoes. They were all amazed when they walked into the polytunnel that was full of tomatoes because the smell hit them and they could just see them. They could see them through the different colours, from green through to the different colours of the ripe ones, and they were picking them and they got to recognise when they were ripe and they're able to pick them. And it was just, they don't necessarily see that, especially in urban areas. They don't necessarily get out to see that. And the more we can do with that, if there could be some form of nationwide program to get children out to community farms. The community farms love it because they need the volunteers and they need the help to pick the produce, and they have too much produce and they want to share. That's the whole point of a community produce. The kitchen back at the school love it because they have excess produce that they can. Most schools now, unfortunately, have a food bank service. I know the ones I work with certainly do. So it expands the food bank offering because we're not only able to give ambient goods, we can give some fresh food as well. And we know fruit and veg consumption is at the lowest in 50 years because of the price of fruit and veg. So anything that can be done to get fresh fruit and veg into families is really important. So yeah, they're lovely projects, love doing them and would love to do more of them, definitely. But it's all in the murky world of grant applications and out of my control.
If people do want to find out more about what you're doing, or like me, follow along with your journey on social media, where can they find you and how can they get in touch?
All my, I suppose, business information is on the healthkit.co.uk, which is all the consultancy and courses and all of that kind of stuff that I do. The community interest company is the Good Food Academy. It has a green avocado with a pink chef's hat on. So that's that one. I don't have social media for that one, but I just put it in, as you know, because you've seen my LinkedIn. It all goes on the same LinkedIn page. So I'm not very good with social media, but I am the most active on LinkedIn. So Louise Mercieca is the only one that I'll actually really respond to is LinkedIn, because the others I kind of forget I've got, and then, oh yeah, I better look at that. And there's been a notification like for months that I've ignored. But LinkedIn I am quite active on. And then there is a website for the Health Kick and a website for the Good Food Academy, which shows the different projects, the limited projects so far that we've been able to do with that one.
Thanks for listening to Podcash. If you enjoyed it, please follow or subscribe on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. You can also watch many of these conversations by heading over to cashalumni.org.uk and going to the CPD and best practice section of the site. That's cashalumni.org.uk.